Thank you, Bob. Those songs fit the topic of what I will talk about this evening. I'm actually talking about maintaining the family boundaries. We had mentioned it this morning about the importance of boundaries and fences. So those songs fit perfect with what I'm going to talk about. I think they would have fit great with Halloween as well, don't you? Yeah. So Ben and I did a quick switch. He mentioned it in his class this morning, and I was going to mention it at the beginning of my sermon, but I got to talking about baptisms and just forgot about reminding you guys that this is going to be kind of a part two. I read a story, it's kind of cute little story about a little boy, and he's watching his dad. His dad is a minister, and his dad is writing his sermon. He's sitting at his desk, and the little boy's watching him, and he's just noticing the writing and the other things his dad is doing, and the little boy said, "Dad, how do you know what to write?" And he said, "Well, son, God tells me what to write." And the little boy said, "Well, why are you crossing some of it out?" So that's what I did on Thursday and Friday. And I realize that sometimes I just talk about too much, try to pack too much in a sermon. And I thought, well, maybe I'll try and cut some stuff out. And you never like to cut stuff out because it's good stuff. But I understand you can't cram it all in one setting. So we were talking about boundaries this morning. And have you ever been in a situation maybe like the school bully who says, he takes his foot, or maybe it's a her, because girls are bullies too sometimes, right? You draw the line and say, "I dare you to cross that line." And they cross it. And you go, "I dare you to cross that line." And they cross it. Well, sometimes our kids cross the lines and, really cross those boundaries. Sometimes we do cross the line with God. And the 7 points that I found in the book that I'm using for a study guide about what happens when our kids push the boundaries. And this assumes that we all agree that there should be some solid boundaries to help our families function in a healthy and cooperative way. And then everybody agrees with these boundaries. Well, what happens when they cross the boundaries? So these 7, the ABCs of maintaining boundaries in families, really are the ABCs of maintaining our relationship with God. And so hopefully this can help a lot of us at different parts of our life. I do have a handout that Connor and Ian are going to pass out, just with the 7 points. You can take those, maybe put them, maybe share them with someone you know who might be having a problem with kids pushing boundaries. Who doesn't? Right, yeah. I know I push the boundaries. My kids push the boundaries. It's something. And I wanted to point out, some people think it's a generational thing, and that subsequent generations are just getting more difficult at pushing the boundaries. And I don't know that it's a generational thing. I think it's a God or a learning to know God sort of thing in regards to boundaries. I'm a baby boomer. I was right on the end of the baby boomer, 1961. I know I don't look that old, but I am. And of course, coming up, my parents were responding to the hippies that, in my parents' view, were just ruining the culture, right? Everything's going upside down. So some of my being raised was in the context of reactionary to the hippie generation, because my dad was not a hippie. My dad was squared away. He was a Marine for a while and kind of never got over that, and I guess that's true, right, Dave? Sometimes you just never get over that. And Semper Fi. And so my dad just had no... remember the song, Have You Ever Heard Rain? By Creedence Clearwater Revival. Remember that song? Have you ever? Oh, my dad hated that song. He hated that song. Nah, I know. And yeah, it was a good song. I said, Dad, isn't this a great song? He said, no, son, this is not a great song. And he went on a rant about the direction of our country. Yes, it sounds familiar. And I remember then, because of the influence of the hippie generation, everybody thought the baby boomers were all going to tank. And, well, I guess the jury's still out on that. But, yes, I guess it has been us who've raised, the kids that are raising the kids. So you could put all the blame on us if that's what you want to do. So I don't think it's a generational thing with the pushing back against the boundaries. I think it's something that happens whenever you establish some goals for your family and some boundaries. And sometimes it's rebellious, but sometimes it's independence. It's growing up, and it's not testing, but it's learning to appreciate the boundaries. And I mean that sincerely. As I began, anybody have this experience? As I got older, my parents became smarter. Yes. So, the first and the ABCs, and we're going to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G if you have your sheet. The first one is ask God for wisdom. What is wrong with our machine? Yes, it is pushing back. Yeah, the machine is pushing back. Okay, let's try it again. There you go. Ask for wisdom. In circumstances in our lives that are complicated, and especially if it's a first-time experience, having children is a first-time experience. I'm so excited. Julie and James, they're like the latest ones we know that are getting ready to have a baby, and they have no idea what's going to happen with them. But it's an exciting journey. It is an exciting journey, but you're going to have a lot of first-time experiences, which means we're going to need wisdom. And sometimes there are going to be trials that come with these first-time experiences. And I believe James speaks directly to that. He says, consider it a great joy, my brothers, when you experience various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, but endurance must complete its work so that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, and I think that is a true statement, it is a possibility that as I move forward in my life as a Christian, in my life as a parent, that I will need wisdom, and I will find situations where I feel like I'm out of my bounds. So now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and without criticizing, and it will be given to him. So that's the first ABC, is to ask for wisdom. We can see that as God deals with us, he deals with us in a very wise way. He allows for mistakes, and he tries to guide us maybe from having the wrong ideas to having the right ideas. And wisdom is knowledge that is applied correctly. The B, be sure that the line has been crossed. In my family, we had 3 boys that were in the same age. And oftentimes, something would happen. And one of the boys, usually wasn't me. It was usually one of my other brothers, either Tommy or Richard, were causing problems. But I never did the tattling, but they tattled on each other. I was low key. I was a good kid growing up. It's my brothers. They were a problem. I was right in the middle. You know how they treat middle kids, don't you? They don't treat them very nicely. And they would always blame each other for stuff that they would do. And I've seen it. You've seen it before, where one child blames the other, goes to the parent, runs and say, blah, 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 did this and did that. And then oftentimes it works because the parents are not sure and they don't know who really did the dastardly deed, or that it was really what the child is saying. Some kids exaggerate and they can make stuff up. And when you haven't done anything and you're blamed for it, it creates tension. And it kind of broadens out from that to, if you represent a false standard as true, it creates problems for people. And I believe that's what's happening in this passage in the book of Mark. Their issue was that Jesus was breaking the Sabbath. And someone pointed this out just recently in our fellowship here. We think about when Jesus was angry and expressed that. And usually we think about what? Clearing the temple. But I wonder if if that was some crazy raging rant, or if it was very intentional and purposeful. So I don't know. I just kind of wonder about that. But here we're told that Jesus got angry. And why did he get angry? It says, now he entered the synagogue again, and a man was there who had a paralyzed hand. In order to accuse him, they were watching him closely to see whether he would heal on the Sabbath. He told the man with the paralyzed hand, stand before us. Then he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do what is good, or to do what is evil, to save a life or to kill? But they were silent because they knew what he was saying. That the standard that they used was false, and they were misrepresenting the truth. They were misrepresenting what was actually happening. So it says, but they were silent. After looking around at them, and with anger and sorrow. And this is what we would expect from Jesus. Anger, because they're misrepresenting the legitimate standard of what is right and wrong. They're misrepresenting the truths of God for their own purposes. And I think that's what happens in our family too. And that creates negative emotions. It creates anger. It's created anger and sorrow, he says, at the hardness of their hearts. And he told the man, stretch out your hand. So he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. Immediately the Pharisees went out and started plotting with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. So Jesus was angry with them because they were representing a false standard. And that can happen in our families for the same reason of trying to accuse somebody else, trying to get someone else in trouble, trying to misrepresent what actually happened. The C stands for confront and clarify. And in the book of Malachi, we see that this is what God does with his people. In the book of Malachi, he is dealing with their attitudes, their wrong attitudes about worship and their responsibility as his people. And so he makes sure they understand what it is that he is saying to them. A son honors his father, and a servant his master. But if I am a father, where is my honor? And if I am a master, where is your fear of me? Says Yahweh of hosts, to you priests who despise my name. Yet you ask, how have we despised your name? By presenting defiled food on my altar. You ask, how have we defiled you? When you say the Lord's table is contemptible. And they might ask another question. When did we say that? And he says, when you present a blind animal for sacrifice, is it not wrong? So God is very careful with them in helping them understand. And oftentimes, where God starts out with his first charge against them, where's the honor that's due me? That's where he starts out. And they're going, what? And so God has to kind of confront them and clarify their issue. And oftentimes, and especially if the standard isn't shared, when a child pushes through the boundary or pushes through the fence, they may not know what did I do wrong? What did I do? And so they may not see their actions as the same thing. And so God takes them through this basically breakdown in what they did and how God sees that as wrong. And so maybe they might say, "Oh God, of course we honor you." It's an easy thing to say. Of course we honor you. But if you know the responsibility and what God is asking for, if you offer a blind and lame animal, then you're dishonoring God. And we need to be able to clarify where the boundaries are in our lives. And again, that's how God deals with us. And God doesn't just focus on maybe what we might see is the presenting problem. He goes to the heart of the matter. And that's what boundaries do. They help us to establish what's right and wrong. And when the boundary is pushed, then we can instead of accusing, instead of instead of being harsh, we can confront and clarify. D, deliver the promised consequence. Very common verse. Very familiar to us. The one who will not use the rod hates his son, but the one who loves him disciplines him diligently. It's underlining the importance of consequences when rebellion is there. And I say, but there also may be consequences if there's if it's not rebellion, if it's maybe some sort of mistake or some sort of a misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't a boundary that was clarified and needed to get the point across better. But we really have to deal with rebellion and when the boundaries are intentionally violated. When I was in junior high, when I moved from Detroit to Phoenix, actually I lived in Mesa, Arizona. They still did a lot of swatting then, a lot of swatting. And my math teacher, Mr. Miller, had a paddle that he kept on display. It was by his desk in the filing cabinet, and on the paddle it said, "The Board of Education." How many of you guys had that one? Yes. And I'm going to be honest. It was effective for me. How many got swats at school back in the day? I know we can't do that anymore. And you guys are all fine. It didn't mess you guys up. You're fine. Isn't that what they say? You guys are fine. So sometimes the teacher would do it. Sometimes the assistant principal would do it. And the assistant principal was a very kind and compassionate man. Sometimes my actions, say in my home, would result in anger. I would get my parents mad at me. And so sometimes that's the way the discipline came across. Like they're mad at me. And I wish I could remember that assistant principal's name. He was a decent, good man. And when he was the one in charge of giving you swats, he was very kind about it. Sir? Oh, okay, sure, yeah. Right. Consistency is definitely a good part of it, but empathy and compassion, I think, is a very important part of it too. And this man, I wish I could remember his name, and he died of leukemia. He had a quick, sometimes leukemia will kill you quickly, and he came down with leukemia, and he died, and at his funeral, it was filled with students and parents who respected him because he would talk to you. He would talk to you about the standard. He would talk to you about what was wrong, and he'd even use that line, "This is going to hurt me more than it hurts you." But you knew he really cared, and And I think that is an important element when it comes to consequences. We can't tell our kids, and God doesn't deal with us that way either. Stop that. I said, stop that. You're going to get in trouble. Stop that. Stop doing that. You're going to get me angry. Stop that. And if you don't, something's going to happen. And oftentimes, nothing happens when the boundaries are crossed. And so something should happen. This morning I mentioned these, and I think these are very valid ways to look at this. There might be the pain of chastisement, and that's the serious sort of pain. That might be what we might call a spanking. I'm not advocating, not advocating. I'm just saying. And this verse may at least reflect the importance of discipline. And see, in the home, the goal is not punishment, but that might be a part of what's going on. Really, the goal is training and discipline. You're trying to enforce or trying to explain and bring about the value of compliance and working together within the boundaries that the family has established. And the purpose and the reason for pain is it puts a value on the behavior. And it also, the extent of the pain needs to meet the crime. So something may indeed call for the pain of chastisement. That there's also the pain of isolation, meaning that if a child is acting up, then we put them by themselves. You have to explain why they're there. It's not just a timeout so you can cool down or whatever. It's, you've pushed this boundary, violated our family agreement, and so we need to have this period of time. Or the pain of removal. And all of those are all legitimate pain. The pain of removal is something, some privilege is taken away, maybe some item. I remember one time I did something, and I don't remember what it was. And my mom, I got grounded. And I had something going on, and so I forget, it was maybe a week or 2 weeks. I got grounded, couldn't leave the house except for school. Like that was a big deal, right? And I said, Mom, can we change the punishment? And part of it was the pain of the removal of that privilege hurt. That hurt. And Mom said, nope. The E stands for explain additional consequences of the action. And what this may be a couple of different things. This may be the restitution. If I've done something to one of my siblings or maybe stole something from a store, which of course would, if it happens outside the home, it's still a breaking of the boundaries and the rules of our home, then there's going to be some punishment related to that. I got, and that might have been I stole a pack of gum one time. And I think that's when I got, for a pack of gum, 2 weeks. Man, but I don't steal gum anymore. So I gave that up. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Juanita has a funny story about her stealing gum, but I can't tell you that. So don't even ask her. It may very well be, and so I had to give the gum back, but I also had to pay for the gum. Of course, I didn't have much money back then, but I still had to pay for it. Sometimes I did other things like that where I would have to work it off for somebody. So not only would there be an immediate consequence, my family wouldn't have said, pain of chastisement, pain of removal, pain of isolation. That's what we tried to practice in our family. But it was kind of the same sorts of things with the same goals in mind. And Zacchaeus kind of puts some self-restitution on himself here. You know, he's realized the direction of his life. He's realized that his life needs to change, and he's realized that he has changed, but there's also some restitution he feels like he needs to make. And so, as Jesus comes and spends time with him, shares a message with him, we're not told what message is shared with him, but it gets to Zacchaeus' heart, and he responds, and he says, but Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord." Why is that appropriate? Because he stole it from the poor in his job. So that's appropriate. And if no sense, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much. So there was an initial reaction to what he had done, and then there was the desire to pay restitution, and that is really significant. That if we have taken something from somebody in our rebellion, that we repay it. F stands for forgive completely. Jesus makes this point very forcefully in Matthew chapter 6, as he is not only teaching his disciples how to pray. So in verse 12 it says, "And forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors." So the importance of the recognition of what has been done for us, and therefore forgive others. And then he develops the idea a little bit more in verses 14 and 15. "For if you forgive people their wrongdoing, your heavenly Father will forgive you as well. But if you don't forgive people, the Father will not forgive your wrongdoing." This is like basic Jesus 101, the idea of forgiveness and forgiving completely. And there are 2 things that I just want to say quickly about that. And the first one is that if you don't, when people forgive, something has been done to them, and when they forgive, and something has been done to them, and it's kind of like garbage in a house. And so you've got to get the garbage out, and that's what forgiveness does. It takes the garbage out. If you don't forgive, you may just move the garbage into another room, but after a while, it's going to start stinking. And that's what we do when we don't forgive, when we don't practice forgiveness. And I don't know if any of you maybe might identify with this, but again, there were times where I felt like my parents didn't like me because they would become angry, either with all of us as a family, all the kids, especially the 3 boys. We've talked about the 3 boys, and then because we did these things, we never felt like we were forgiven, and that can add up, and that can create bitterness. And one of the things that we try to stress with our kids is that if you've done something wrong that has violated the family rules, that has pushed the boundaries, you need to ask for forgiveness. Figure out some way to say, I'm sorry for doing this, can you forgive me? Or will you forgive me? Because you have to answer that with a straight-on specific answer. And of course, you're not going to say no. Hopefully you won't say no. Hopefully you won't say, I don't know if I can. I've heard stuff like that before. And that's that thing that creates doubt. And we wonder, do my parents really care? Or, maybe not today, maybe tomorrow. We'll talk about this tomorrow. No. If they ask for forgiveness, and if you've taught them that standard of asking for forgiveness, then grant the forgiveness. And then G, graciously restore and move on. And I tell you, some of the best bonding moments have come after some sort of, and oftentimes with our kids, when they've been rebellious and we've had to come down on them, and maybe it's the pain of chastisement. What happens after has been very powerful, because one, it explains something about how God deals with us. I'm glad that God doesn't hold a grudge against me. I'm glad that He doesn't hold that over my head. You did all these things, and now, I don't know. He's not like that. He completely forgives us. And I hope this passage that's on the screen is one of your favorite passages. You can highlight it in your smart Bible, or maybe with your dumb Bible, you can just highlight it with a highlighter. It says, "The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, rich in faithful love. He will not always accuse us or be angry forever. He has not dealt with us as our sins deserve, or repaid us according to our offenses." God doesn't hold a grudge. It says, "For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is His faithful love toward those who fear Him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has He removed our transgressions from us. As a father has compassion on his children, so the Lord has compassion on those who fear Him." That is the model for moving forward, that we completely separate the problems that we have and the rebellion and the sin completely. How far is the east from the west? It never meets. North and south eventually meets. East and west it never meets. And that's significant love. And that's a significant love for us to practice, certainly in our homes. And we know that what happens in our homes are places where our kids learn how to relate to others. So to be able to graciously restore and move on and not force our kids or force one another to live in the shadow of the past. And that's where, even now, I just, some of us replay tapes in our minds of all the things that we've done wrong. And there's so much regret just for the things that I'm legitimately guilty of. But the idea that these things haven't been resolved, it keeps us in the shadow of the past. And God doesn't want us to live in the shadow of the past. In our relationship with Him, He doesn't want our families to live in the shadow of the past, because what happens in the past it pales in comparison to what needs to happen in the future. So I just want to close and strive, encourage you to strive for balance and create harmony and balance, and that's what boundaries do for us. They create harmony and balance in our homes. If we all agree on that, if we all agree on the rules and the things that need to go forward, even though we're all different, families are made up of different types of people, different strengths and weaknesses. We're not all the same, but we can still all find that balance. The material is from the Shepherd Leader at Home. Timothy Whitmer is the author. And if you'd like a more detailed explanation, you can find these principles on pages 147 and 150 of his book. I think I mentioned that on the sheet that I gave you. So that would help you to flesh this out. I think these are great suggestions for our families in order to help all of us respect the boundaries. And the bottom line is what we're doing is we're trying to teach one another how to understand and live within the boundaries that God sets for us.